Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and this is my life now. I don't know, maybe you hear the baby in the background. He just might join us for some episodes sometimes, and that's okay. And you might be wondering, wow, this is a really risky podcast. He doesn't need to be exposed to serial killers and things like that. So this episode's fine, all right? Because this week we're talking about some famous con artists from history, just people who were such terrible human beings that they realized that their true self was just unlovable and completely incapable of functioning in society. And so they decided to be someone else and then bring a bunch of other people along with them. So we are looking at three stories today of John Schmidt, Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt, and our first story of Lord Gordon Gordon. In 1868, a man going by the name of Lord Glencairn conned the Marshall & Son jewelry store in London for over $30,000. And no one knew who this guy was, but they suspected that he was the illegitimate son of a clergyman and a maid, and then kind of just dropped it. And then 2 years later, this guy who I guess apparently was still around and people still knew of him, he left Britain for the United States and ended up landing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, upon arriving in Minnesota, this man changed his name to Lord Gordon Gordon and claimed to be the descendant of an ancient line of Scottish kings. He quickly started involving himself in the Northern Pacific Railway and told executives that he was going to buy large tracts of land to settle people from the overpopulated areas of Scotland. He was going to bring them over to the United States and give them this land. However, Gordon, in order to do this, Gordon first needed to go to New York City and inform people that he needed to transfer funds from Scotland to finance this purchase. So he quickly found Jay Gould, who was a wealthy businessman who was trying at that time to take over the Erie Railroad. And so Gordon convinced Gould that he could help him in his quest of taking over the Erie Railroad by getting several of Gordon's investors, who didn't exist, to put stock into Gould's company. All Gould had to do first was give Gordon $1 million in stock options. Gould thinks this is too good to be true. This is great. This is exactly what he needs. So he happily gives Gordon the stock, who then promptly turns around and sells it, which is not a nice thing to do. It's not what Gould probably wanted him to do with it. And so in response, Gould sued Gordon and put him on trial in 1873. So already you kind of see where this could be an issue, right? This kid in the background, I don't know if you can even hear it. He's just in his own world laughing at the fan. He loves fans. Yeah, I know. How's that going back there? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about con artists? Are you going to be a con artist one day? Oh, I hope not. You better not. No, you better be a good boy. Anyway, okay. So obviously this is kind of a problem for Lord Gordon Gordon because now he's in the middle of this lawsuit. He's got to reveal who his true identity is. And so in this process, he quickly hands over several names of his alleged European clients that he claimed would invest in the Erie Railroad. And once he did this, the court granted his bail while they checked to make sure that those references were real. And obviously they weren't, but this is just how they operated. So while these claims were under review, Gordon fled to Canada, where he told authorities that Gould's claims against him were false and that he totally was not lying about all of his European investors, even though he definitely was. And then because this dude just couldn't help himself, this is just who he is as a person, he offered to just buy most of the province of Manitoba, claiming that he could make Canada a much more prosperous nation, which the balls on this guy, right? He's being sued for conning this guy out of $1 million or more, really. And then he just goes to Canada and he's like, hey guys, listen, there's this guy, he's trying to sue me. It's total bogus. But while I'm here, what are you doing with Manitoba? Doesn't seem like it's a lot going on out there. You got a couple towns. that's really it. Let me buy it from you. All right. And you look, you can do whatever you want with the money, but look, you're going to make more money off of me selling you or buying this province from you than you would just collecting taxes on it for like another 300 years. Just insane to me. Meanwhile, Gould quickly tracked Gordon down, but couldn't actually convince Canadian authorities to hand him over. And so instead, Gould and a group of his associates, including 3 guys who would go on to become members of Congress, kidnapped Gordon and tried to sneak him back into the United States. However, the Northwest Mounted Police stopped Gould's group, arrested them, and put them in prison without bail. When Minnesota Governor Horace Austin found out about the incident, he put a call out to the Minnesota State Militia because he wasn't about to let Canada take a group of Americans as prisoners for no reason, right? I mean, this is becoming an international crisis now. And within hours, thousands of volunteers from all over Minnesota prepared for a literal full invasion of Canada because of this guy. That threat was apparently enough to scare the Canadians, who then quickly released Gould and his men on bail. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, news of Gordon's embezzlement and theft finally reached Europe, and the Marshall & Son Jewelry Company that he had robbed back in 1868 when this story started sent a representative to Canada to positively identify Gordon as Lord Glencairn. In one last effort to get away, Gordon claimed that this representative that had been sent over from Marshall & Son was actually part of a larger smear campaign being run by Gould. But at this point, Canadian authorities did not believe him and extradited him back to the States. And then after holding a farewell party in his hotel room, Lord Gordon shot and killed himself on August 1st, 1874. And like, no one really knows who this guy was. He just like showed up one day, started conning people, and then it like grew into this massive thing that like almost basically caused a war between Canada and the United States. It's just an insane story. Our next story here is of John Schmidt, who was born in 1855 in Germany and then immigrated to the United States in 1883 with his wife, Anne Hock. Maybe, right? There are also reports that he arrived in 1888 as a widower after his wife had died 2 months prior. Additionally, other sources claim that Schmidt was married to a woman named Christine Ram, who he had 3 children with before deserting the family in 1887. So already 3 different origin stories, and a lot of this is probably just not going to make sense. The timeline for Schmidt's life is incredibly vague, and like, I'm going to lay it all out for you and you'll really see what I mean. So 1892, Schmidt, under the alias Hoyle Hawk, killed his wife. Why did he kill his wife? We don't know. How did he kill his wife? Again, we don't know, because history was not prepared for the insane roller coaster that this guy was about to take it on. Which wife was it, based on the 3 different women that we know of so far, right? Was it Anne Hock? Was it the widowed woman that he had arrived in the States with? Or was it Christine Ram? We don't know. It just, Hoyle Hawk killed his wife. And then later figured out that Hoyle Hawk was John Schmidt. Later in 1892, Schmidt rented an apartment in Chicago under the name C.A. Meyer with his new wife, who then died 3 weeks later. He then rented another apartment with another new wife under the name H. Eyrick, and then that wife died a month later. Now, there's a big old juicy stank. Oh, somebody's filling up that diaper. Might have to take a pause. When he starts getting a little fussy, because he's got a big old Duke in his diaper. Anyway, so 1892, he has 3 wives. They all die. Did he murder them? I mean, we know he murdered at least one of them. Did he murder the other 2? Did those women even exist? Who knows? That's just what is reported. The next year, 1893, Schmidt, claiming to be Dr. James, then married Lena Schmitz in Milwaukee, who then subsequently died a short time later. He then married Lena's sister, Clara, who also died. In 1895, after yet another new apartment and yet another dead wife, Schmidt was arrested under the alias C.A. Calford after his next wife, Janet Spencer, accused him of deserting her and stealing a few $100s. Schmidt was also charged with kidnapping Huldah Stevens and participating in a diamond robbery. Apparently didn't serve any prison time for these accusations, mainly because he had fled to Wheeling, West Virginia, and then using the name Jacob Huff, married a woman named Caroline Hawk. She died a month later while Schmidt faked his own death, changed his name to Jacob Hawk, and then returned to Chicago, where he just bought an entire saloon. Where is he getting all of this money? Well, I know where he's getting all the money. He's inheriting the estates from all of his dead wives that he probably keeps killing. In August 1895, Schmidt married Maria Steinbucker, who then died 4 months later. In November, he then married Mary Rankin, which, that's even before Steinbucker died. But then Schmidt disappeared with Rankin's money the day after the wedding. This dude, this just seems like so much work. I put in a lot of work to get married at age 30, 31, 30? Anyway, you get it. I can't imagine how much work it was for this dude to change his name, come up with all these backstories, marry all of these women in a matter of weeks, not years, not even months, weeks. And then he kills them, and then he inherits all their money and estates, and then he goes and does it again. It's amazing, really, how he could do this sort of thing. So in 1896 now, under the name Jacob Erdorf, Schmidt married Maria Hartsfield. And then 4 months later, he took $600 and left. In September, he married Barbara Brossett and disappeared 2 days later with nearly $1,500 of her money. Barbara, who was already a widow, then died of depression and trauma directly related to that event. That's so sad, but God, it's funny. He then married Cara Bartell, who died 3 months later. And then at some point in 1896, Schmidt spent some amount of time in Baltimore, somehow married 4 different women in Baltimore. One of them died. I don't know what happened to the other 3. In 1897, Schmidt, who was back under the name Jacob Hawk, married Julia Dose in Cincinnati. This time, he didn't even wait until the day after the wedding. He left the night of the wedding with $700 of her money. Why are these women just giving him his money? Is that how weddings used to go? Instead of the old-timey dowry, the bride just showed up with all of the money in her bank account and was like, "Here, husband. Now our finances can be as one. This is all the money that I have." I have no idea. 7 months later, Schmidt got married again, this time under the name Henry F. Hartman. And then by December of that year, he was in New York, where he married a woman in the Williamsburg neighborhood and stole $200 from her. In 1898, here's the thing, if he's just going to steal all this money, why go through the trouble of getting married? Why go through the whole, going to court, filling out all the paperwork? Just steal the money from her and then leave. This is so crazy. In 1898, in January of 1898, he married Winnie Westfall in Jersey City, New Jersey, under the name William Frederick Bessing, and then promptly stole $900 from her. Another one of his wives died in Buffalo, New York, and then he reappeared in Chicago as Merritt's Dots with another wife who would die 3 months later. This time, however, he was arrested, not for murder, but for selling mortgaged furniture, which I don't understand how that's a crime. I don't know what mortgaged furniture is anyway, but whatever. And he was actually sentenced to 1 year in jail. So in 1899, after he was out of jail, Schmidt returned to Milwaukee and married another woman who then obviously she died a few weeks later. He then disappeared with $1,200 that she had. And then meanwhile, another one of his wives died in Norfolk, Virginia. In 1900, Schmidt married Mary Hendrickson and, under the name Albert Bushberg, another woman named Mary Schultz in Indiana, almost simultaneously. Along with $2,000, Mary's 15-year-old daughter disappeared under mysterious circumstances when Schmidt ran off. He then returned to Chicago, where, back under the name Jacob Hawk, he married Anna Sheffries. He then married Amelia Hahn under the name John Healy and then disappeared after stealing $100 from her. Like, you can see how like confusing this is. I'm amazed that a lot of people were able to put all of these pieces together, that this was all the same guy, because we still got a few more years to go. In 1901, under the name Carl Schmidt, he married a woman in Columbus, Ohio, and then left 2 weeks later with $400. He then went out to San Francisco, where he married another woman who died shortly after the wedding. And then he finished that year by marrying Anna Gerke, who he quickly deserted. In 1902, he married Mary Becker in St. Louis. She died the following year. A month after that marriage, under the nickname Count Otto Van Kern, because why not just get silly with it, he married Hulda Nagel and immediately persuaded her to turn all of her real estate holdings and liquidate them into cash. And then while she was off, so she goes and does this. It's her new husband. He knows best, obviously. So she sells off all her real estate, gets all this cash. Schmidt actually gives her a portion. He's like, hey, baby, go buy you some fancy clothes or something. And while she's off on a shopping spree, he takes the rest, which was like $3,000, and deserts her. In 1903, under the name Dr. G.L. Hart, Schmidt was actually forced to flee after failing to poison his new wife of 3 days, Mabel Leichman. So he marries this woman. 3 days later, tries to poison her, and it actually doesn't work. And so she's pissed. So he flees. He was, however, able to steal $300 worth of diamonds and $200 in cash from her. He then shows up in Dayton, Ohio, where he marries and deserts both Annie Dodd and Regina Miller Curtis before going back to Milwaukee for like a third time at least, and doing the same to a woman named T. O'Connor. In 1904, under the name John Jacob Adolf Schmidt, not Jingleheimer, but it's close. It's funny. It's funny to me anyway. He married Anna Hendrickson in Hammond, Indiana. 18 days later, he deserts her and steals $500. He then goes back to Milwaukee and marries Lena Hawk. All of these people named Hawk. It's crazy. Who died 3 weeks later. Schmidt then goes back to Chicago, where under the name Leo Prager marries Bertha Dolder. Now, for whatever reason, Dolder gave Schmidt $3,500 to buy a furniture store, which he then instead used to buy $1,200 worth of rugs before disappearing with the rest of the cash. It makes no sense. After marrying Caroline Stryker in Philadelphia, Schmidt then goes back to Chicago and then under the name Joseph Hawk marries Mary Walker. Schmidt somehow convinces this woman to sell the candy store that she owned for $75 and give him her life savings of $350. Like at this point, he's just preying on any sad, no self-esteem having woman. Walker died a month later. Shocking. In 1905, almost done. In 1905, Schmidt married Walker's sister in Joliet, Illinois. Even more, he used a different name, which somehow did not seem to raise any red flags at all. Like, how dumb is this family in particular, right? Like, we can talk about all the other women, sure. But this Walker family, right? Like, he comes in, he marries Marie Walker, convinces her to sell the candy store that she ran for all of $75. Even the kid can't believe it. He knows it's dumb. Then convinces her to give him her life savings of only $350, which again, early 1900s, pretty decent, I guess. Walker then dies a month later. And then the following year, this guy who people thought was named Joseph Hawk, he comes in and he finds Walker's sister in Joliet, Illinois. Surely she knew that her sister had been married to this guy, but then he's like, no, my name's actually whatever. It didn't actually say this time. And it marries her and then shockingly deserts her and stole another $500. After that, it's just nuts. After that, he moves to New York City, where under the name Harry Bartels, he actually proposed to his new landlady, Catherine Kimmerly, but this time she rejected his proposal. And then somehow in all of this, his entire swindling operation became uncovered. No one is really like super detailed on any of this, which is also frustrating, but he was finally arrested. While in custody, Schmidt told police that his real name was definitely 100% for sure John Joseph Adolf Hawk, because no, it wasn't. He was then charged with 2 counts of bigamy, even though he had roughly 30 wives at this point who were still alive in various parts of the Midwest. So it's not even bigamy, it's polygamy at this point. As news of his arrest and exploits spread, 5 more women came forward and claimed Schmidt, or like at least one of his aliases, as having been their husband at some point. Finally, on May 5th, Schmidt was convicted of Marie Walker's murder and sentenced to death. He tried to appeal, but that got overturned, and he was executed in Chicago on February 23rd, 1906. So, in all, police believe that Schmidt bigamously married at least 55 different women over a 15-year period, which, again, just seems like a lot of extra work if you're just going to steal money from them. Like, just take their money, bro. But just going through all of these extra steps to get married just seems so unnecessary. He also killed a lot of them, at least 15 with arsenic. Some reports, though, estimate that he killed as many as 50 different women, wives, and others along the way. But again, he never really ended up confessing a ton of stuff. Police just kind of pieced together different events. And obviously, like, a guy marrying a woman and then deserting her is like not like a huge newsworthy event, you know, or even like a woman dying, like even early 1900s, like no one cared. No one cared as much about a white woman getting murdered as they do right now. So like if that stuff's happening today, this dude gets away with it maybe twice and then he's caught for sure. Anyway, our final story here is of Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt, which begins on June 4th, 1993, when an Arca Airlines cargo plane carrying flowers landed at Miami International Airport. And so as the runway workers prepared to unload the plane, they were shocked to find an unconscious person just lying on the tarmac. The man who told workers that he was 13-year-old Guillermo Rosales from Colombia, which he wasn't actually either of those things, had sneaked onto the plane's wheel well and actually had survived the flight at 35,000 feet, even though he was unconscious for most of it. And that part was true. This dude like climbed into the wheel well and just held on for dear life on one of the wheels of this plane on the landing gear. This plane's flying at 35,000 feet. It's super cold. He's knocked unconscious because of the air pressure, lack of oxygen. And then, you know, when the plane lands, he falls out and, you know, somehow stayed on, like kept hanging on until the plane had arrived at the gate. And then he falls out. And so he tells people he's this 13-year-old kid, and news of this boy's arrival, like it's national news, obviously. And so a wealthy woman in Texas hears about this story. She sets up a bank account for him, and he was actually taken in by Miami police officer Jairo Lozano and his wife, Bertha Soto Aguilar. And a week later, like because of this story, the family was actually given a day pass to the Fontainebleau, one of the nicest hotels in Miami. Somehow Guillermo even came home with a gold chain and $200 in cash. And so like this kid, 13-year-old Guillermo Rosales, he's from Colombia. This is a national story. Why did he do this? It's sad. Like he just wanted a better life. And then it quickly unravels. Immigration officials determined that the boy was not 13 years old. He was rather 17 years old. And his real name, as you probably figured out by now, was Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt. And he was immediately deported back to Colombia. Well, he was not about to stay in Colombia. And 6 weeks later, he was back in New York in a home for runaways. And with the first chance he got, this guy disguised himself as a priest and hopped on a southbound train to try to go back to Miami. Unfortunately, he was arrested and deported almost immediately as soon as he did get back to Miami. So like he made it, like he hoboed his way from New York down to Miami and then immediately got caught and deported again. After a failed attempt to fly to Miami from Dublin, which, like, how do you get from Dublin from Colombia? Like, that's impressive. He was then arrested in Tokyo. Like, this guy gets around, which is good for him. So he's in Dublin. He tries to get back to Miami, fails. Then he goes to Tokyo, where he's arrested for possession of a stolen credit card. During that arrest, he identified himself as Cedar God, I'm so tired. I can't read to save my life. This is probably not even a good episode. He identified himself as Cedar Ortgosa. My mouth doesn't work. He identifies himself as another person. You get it. Paid a small fine. He's let go. The next year he makes it back to the United States, but he's arrested in New York after he tried using another stolen credit card to make almost $2,000 in charges at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. That's that famous hotel from like the Home Alone 2 movie. All of that earned him a stay at the Metropolitan Detention Center, Guaynabo in Puerto Rico, where he began telling people that all of this, you guys, just a big misunderstanding. He'd realize, look, here's the thing, guys, in reality, he's not just some con man or some runaway. He's actually Prince Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt, son of Queen Margaret of Denmark and Duke Oscar Adolf III of Luxembourg. Duh. Come on, guys, clearly, obviously. No one even bothered to verify this. The Puerto Rican authorities just let him go. They're like, it's probably true. That sounds about right. And then you just let him go. So dumb. On August 14th, 2003, a man named Daniel Gold reported that he had been robbed at his Four Seasons room in Las Vegas. But what had actually happened was a man claiming to be Gold, you know who it was. A man claiming to be Gold had approached the front desk saying that he needed a copy of his incidentals charges and a spare key to his room. He then told the front desk that his wife was upset with him and was actually waiting for him and his kids downstairs. And in less than 10 minutes, the hotel had phoned up to his room, told him what was going on. And so Gold's nanny brought everyone down, and there was then subsequently no one in the room, but this guy had a key. So he goes up, robs the room. And when the real Daniel Gold arrived back at his room, he was missing a $10,000 Rolex watch, a $30,000 ring, a $15,000 necklace, his plane tickets, his passport, and more, totaling roughly $300,000 in value. Which also, why are you just leaving that stuff around? I don't know. It seems kind of dumb. A few months later, the nearby Bellagio Hotel was robbed in a similar manner. Even worse, police had no idea who was behind it, but I mean, you guys do, because you know who the story's about. On December 20th, 2004, a man reported several items that had been stolen from his room at the Dorchester in London. An off-duty police officer soon spotted a man wearing a jacket and watch that had been reported stolen, and came up, tried to arrest him or question him about it. And then this guy quickly turned everything over and told police that his name was David Iglesias Vieto. However, police didn't really believe him and instead went and searched the apartment that this guy was renting. Inside, they found a Russian passport belonging to Denis Vladimirovich Keselev. And at that point, this guy was like, okay, guys, all right, sorry, you got me. My name is really Alejandro Quincas. And I honestly, like, I'd really recently just seen Catch Me If You Can. All right. Remember that, that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio, playing a guy named Frank Abagnale, whatever. I don't know what the name is. I didn't see the movie, but this dude saw it and he was just like, I just want to be real life Frank. I want to be Leo in real life. You get what I'm saying? He then admitted to robbing 4 other London hotels. And at that point, they believed that this guy was actually Gonzalo Zapater Vives, who they had been suspected of robbing several other hotels years before. And then when word got out about this, the French investigators asked if the man was actually Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt, who had robbed a Four Seasons resort in Paris in 2001. Las Vegas police found out that this guy was in custody, showed him the man's picture to Daniel Gold's nanny, who confirmed that all these guys were the same person. So they finally got their man. Everything's good, except, not surprisingly, he escapes from custody and then just goes back to stealing things, which, like, that's when you know you have a problem, right? You finally get caught. This long-running con finally catches up with you, and then you get a chance to escape and totally redeem yourself. Just like lay low forever, like that's past, but no, this dude can't help himself. He goes back on another burglary spree. 2 weeks later, he was arrested in Dublin with a stolen $35,000 Rolex watch. Again, he claimed that his name was Alejandro Cuencas. By 2007, Switzerland had now become involved when security camera footage caught a man impersonating a guest at the Four Seasons in Geneva. Also, why are you robbing the same hotels? Like, switch it up. Like, all of these hotels are going to be on high alert for you at all of their locations. So go rob a different place. Ugh, idiot. Anyway, finally on September 21st, 2009, an off-duty officer in Derbyline, Vermont, of all places, ran into Juan Carlos as he was purchasing an apple and asking about a nearby college. Can't imagine why. The problem, though, about it was that there wasn't actually a college nearby except for a high school that was across the border in Quebec, which they refer to as colleges because, French. The officer, though, was really curious about this and asked the man's name and was told that he was Jordi Ejarque Rodriguez. And the officer didn't really believe that. So he searched the man and found a Spanish passport belonging to someone completely different. And then finally, the guy revealed that he was, in fact, Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt. Despite all of these crimes and the amount of hours that police put into trying to figure out who this guy really was, he only received a 2.5-year prison sentence, which is so dumb. Even more, like, what he was convicted of wasn't even for any of the robberies. It was instead for illegally entering the United States from Canada because, America. All right. So some con artists in the books. We will have another episode on some more famous con artists from history, way down the road. But yeah, made it through the recording without having to stop and console a crying baby or change a poopy diaper, which is great. We love that for me. Love that for the show, for the pod. So I am concerned, though, that my time of peace is running out. So let's get to what we learned and wrap this show up.
What did we learn?
Number one, Lord Gordon almost caused a war between Canada and the United States. Canada just detained wealthy businessmen without bail. Minnesota was like, hey, I'm not having that there, because that's how Minnesota people talk probably. And then they organized a militia and was like, we're coming for our dudes. And then Canada was like, oh, I'm sorry, we'll give them back. And then that was it. And no one knew who this guy even was. No one has any idea who Lord Gordon actually was. He was just a con man, and then he killed himself when everything collapsed on him. Anyway, number two, John Schmidt. Just a random hodgepodge of bigamy and deserting wives. A lot of work to ultimately only end up with $20,000 maybe. But yeah, married 55 different women, killed most of them, and stole all their money. Just a terrible person. And then number three, Juan Carlos Guzman-Betancourt. I think he just wanted to be in America, you guys. You really got to want it to hole up in the cargo hold of a plane and brave the 35,000 feet, but he did it. And then he just stole everything from everybody until he was eventually caught for illegal immigration, of all things, because that's the most important thing. Next week on Our Weird World, we are headed back to World War II with some more lesser known stories from every middle-aged white man's favorite war. We are looking at the stories of Alistair Urquhart, Saburo Sakai, Calvin Graham, Franz von Vera, and Ludmila Pavlichenko. Just an assortment of people from the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that fought in this war who did some crazy stuff. So, gonna check those stories out next week, but that is gonna do it today. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Finn says hi. He enjoyed it. So screw your judgment if you had any. And yeah, keep it weird.